guys are going over to Sonic Vista Studios, and they're going to be given an absolutely fantastic remixing masterclass by Sasha himself.
We didn't know that we will meet in person, you know, Sasha, but this is very exciting.
This is Sonic Vista Studios. You guys are all down here because you won the contest. We want to see you guys on the charts, and we want to see you guys' faces on the billboards of Ibiza, so it's time to work hard.
So thanks for coming down, Sasha, really appreciate it. Great stuff. I'm just going to go through what your sort of thought processes are on remixing.
Yeah, I think I mean, it varies greatly from if your approach to do a track, whether I hear something that I really want to remix and I call the label up. I don't know, each track has its own identity and its own life, and the remixes, you approach them different ways, I think. I mean, there are certain records where the original parts are fantastic and it's just not really maybe arranged and sonically big enough to work on a dance floor. So you end up using a lot of the original parts, you know, processing them yourself, but keeping a lot of the integrity of the original track. But then there's other tracks that maybe they've had other remixes done, or there's been different interpretations. Maybe it's an older track, and you really want to kind of pull it to pieces and create your own brand new track out of maybe one or two of the elements. I think with the remix competition, they were the mixes that I was more inclined to put into the winners list, because there were so many mixes. I heard so many re-edits of the original parts that I was just not interested after listening to Site 600. With the amount of people that were going to be entering this competition, it was very important to put your own identity onto the remix, because otherwise it just sounds like a re-edit, and you know, it wasn't a re-edit competition. You know, but sometimes, you know, if you're the only remixer and it's a big track and it's, you know, and it's got really great parts, but you know your mix is going to be the only one that people are going to be playing out there, I think it's okay to keep the integrity of the original parts. But with something like this, with 900 entries, it's very important to kind of make your own identity shine through.
It's a key thing, isn't it, about how influenced you are by the original as well, because I have to admit, when I've done remixes in the past, I've actually deliberately gone another way and I've actually not listened to the original.
Right.
And I've purposely done that because I didn't want to be too influenced by the original.
Well, the Layer and Bushwhacker mix, I didn't even play my original mix. I was finishing my mix while they were actually working on the remix. All I did is I sent them a few of the parts. So they'd not even heard my mix, so they completely took it off in their own direction, which was good, I think, because they weren't influenced by that. But yeah, it can work in other ways as well. I remember I got asked to do a remix of Belfast by Orbital, and it was one of my favourite sort of seminal records from my Shelley's days back in the day. And we worked on this remix, and it was a very hard mix to do because I was so reverential of the original track that we ended up taking it off in a completely different direction. But the band hated it because they thought we'd taken it too far. So it actually ended up being Belfunk, which was on my Expander EP. That was originally a remix for Orbital, but they couldn't get their heads around the fact we'd taken it so far away from what their original track was.
Again, it's another key thing to consider, isn't it, is what the artist's interpretation of what you should be doing there as well. You know, you said you give that example of the Orbital thing, and you know,
you never know how it's going to be received.
Do you find like there's a common place where you always start a remix? Is it different every time, or do you have any sort of go-to processes where you start a remix?
I use a program called Mixed in Key. I don't actually really use it to DJ with too much. I don't follow it religiously to DJ, but I went through my entire sound library, like 15 years of sounds, and I mixed and keyed it. So I have this drive, and it's full of everything's broken down. Every single sound I have is broken down into keys. So if I'm starting to work on a remix, a lot of the time I'll go to, if it's in E minor, I'll go to my E minor folder and just start throwing things into Ableton loops, whether it's from, I put everything into Mixed in Key, my iTunes folder, my DJ tracks, my classical music soundtracks, and then every single sort of sound that I've worked on in the studio over the last 15 years, from all the outtakes of my remixes, everything that was like left on the cutting room floor. I used Mixed in Key to kind of organise it. You start to piece together things, and everything's in key, and it's a very quick way. Within an hour or so, you've got something that sounds like it's going in a direction. So
once you've got the idea of what you want I mean, in terms of how you load it in, I mean, do you just sort of start off at like a 16-bar loop, or do you kind of do it from the beginning all the way through in terms of arrangements?
Getting from that loop page to the arrangement page is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Because you can have stuff that works so well as a loop, but then once you start to break it down and try and arrange it, you can lose so much. So yeah, that's one of the big challenges. I know a couple of producers that start at the beginning of their record and they build the track as it goes along. I've tried to do that, but I just can't do that.
So once you've sort of expanded on it, do you sort of have any sort of absolute sort of go-to either pieces of equipment or go-to kind of techniques that you'd use once you've got everything where you want it to be?
What I've found recently is actually mixing stuff out into an analog desk and stuff, and actually I've just got really got the results much quicker than doing everything within the computer. But I have to be pretty much 90% decided on the arrangement and the sound of the record before I do that. Otherwise, you can end up chasing your tail a little bit. If you can get it sounding, 80% on your laptop, by running it through a desk and just treating it with some of that kind of, almost like mastering it a little bit yourself. It just brings things alive. I write everything on my laptop. I'll be in hotel rooms jet lagged at 4 in the morning and I'll start messing around with sounds, and there's a few stock sounds that I have on my laptop that I really like to write with, but I don't want to use them on every single record, so a lot of the time I'll write some ideas down on my laptop, and then as soon as I get into the studio I'll transfer them onto analog synths and stuff like that to create a new a different sound. There's no piece of software that's the right way to do it. I've just when I first built my studio, like back in the day, I started just buying sounds on sound every month, and I just kept on thinking I had to buy that extra piece of equipment because I wasn't getting the sound. And after about 3 years, I had a studio full of equipment I didn't know how to use.
Any tracks in your opinion that should never be remixed?
Belfast or classic records are very hard to. But then you see what Soulwax did with the you can't always get what you want, the Rolling Stones, and they nailed it.
Yeah.
It's just you've got to have big balls to remix a classic track.
Any sort of final kind of tips and tricks for the guys in terms of how they could go about sort of further remixing, or have they impressed you enough already?
It really impressed me. I mean, it was hard. When we got down to the last 50, it was almost a relief. It was going through that long list, and you have to give each one a decent listen. But then, like I said, it got to the point where I'd heard so many re-edits. But once I started hearing my own sounds in there, it was pretty much onto the next one, onto the next one. It was whenever I heard one that started differently, I had a different sound to it. Then it would get a full listen. Yeah, it was definitely a challenge to still love the record after listening to so many versions of it. It was definitely a challenge to hear his voice, but it's been a week now, so I haven't heard it. So.
We went to meet Sasha in the studio, and that was pretty massive.
I've been a Sasha fan for years, so obviously it's a good thing for me to meet him in person.
I've never met Sasha personally, and there we were, everybody sitting in the studio.
Really good to be part of the interview and just kind of watching it as it happened, and obviously having the option to ask him questions directly, and just really cool.
Sasha was commenting on a lot of things, technical things, theoretical things.
I'm also particularly looking forward to tonight, seeing Sasha play at Amnesia. It's going to be good.
Vibe is something else. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.